chose a career that took me down the science path, and I work for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. And they are the agency, the state government agency that is involved with taking care of all the wildlife of the state of Iowa. Who does the wildlife of the state of Iowa belong to?
Everyone.
Everyone, exactly. But I am paid to manage that wildlife for everyone. So some people will use that wildlife to view it, some people will use that wildlife to hunt it, some people just want to know that it's out there. But it's my job to make sure that that wildlife is out there for all Iowans to enjoy. So, that being said, I have a degree from Iowa State University that has a program that allows me to study wildlife and understand wildlife better so that I can manage it for everybody to the best of my abilities. So, I work through what's called the research section. Does anybody know what research is? What is research?
When you look up something.
Absolutely. And so what I like to do is tell people, like, have you guys ever done a book report?
Yeah.
Okay, so a book report is kind of like research. So the teacher can assign everybody the same book to read, right? But that would be kind of slow. But if she assigned 30 people 30 different books to read, and then you gave a short summary of that book, 30 people could enjoy 30 different books. So instead of all of you learning about wild turkeys or all of you learning about deer, I go and answer questions, and then I can report back to people that shorter answer. So you don't all have to learn everything about deer, or everything about turkeys, or everything about salamanders, or everything about turtles, because that'd be a lot of information for everybody to read, right?
Yeah.
So research is we ask that question, and then we go out and we collect data, and then we write the report so that we can tell people what we found out. So do you guys know about the scientific method yet? If you haven't learned that, that's going to be a really fun one of these
Well,
days.
they've changed it to now the science and engineering practices. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's always something new. I know, right?
That's what
Yes.
happens when you get to be old like me. They
Isn't
keep
it funny?
changing things.
I know. I
But
can't
the
believe it either.
scientific practices or the scientific method means that there's a reason and a way that we go after finding answers so that we can be efficient in how we do it. And usually it starts with a question. That's how most science usually starts, is there's a question. And that can be a simple question or it can be a very complex question. Complex means a very difficult question, which means it takes a lot more thought. But then we have to collect data, right? We go out, we ask the question, and we collect the data. Then we do our math and we analyze the data, and then we write our report. So there's lots of steps to that scientific method, that scientific process. And you guys are all gonna learn that as you get older. It's gonna be so much fun. You know what I love about wildlife? The questions. Do we know everything about wildlife? No. But there's always questions. There's always things to ask and answer and understand. And most of us enjoy wildlife, right? I think most of you know what the #1 outdoor recreation is for most Iowans? It's gonna surprise you. A lot of people say hunting or maybe canoeing or camping. What is it?
Farming?
Farming, that's a good outdoor activity, but enjoy that involves wildlife.
Wildlife.
Wildlife in general, yeah.
Finding animals.
Finding animals. Have you guys ever stop when you like see a bunny rabbit run across the yard and just stop and watch it?
Mm-hmm.
What about in the wintertime? What's that?
I saw a bunny need a puppet flag of it before.
What about how many people like to sit in their house and look out the window and watch what? Birds. Bird watching is the #1 activity. And you know what really good bird watchers do? They don't watch birds, they listen for birds. They learn how to understand how the birds are talking to each other. And that's the stuff that intrigues me, because if you start listening to wildlife or watching wildlife, you can understand how they interact with each other. If you ever walk into the woods, just out walking, the first thing you're gonna hear, there's 2 animals that are gonna talk first. What are they?
A squirrel.
Squirrels, absolutely my favorite animal.
Birds.
And blue jay birds. Blue jays will always scream to tell other wildlife that something new is in the woods, and squirrels will always bark at you. They'll bark to let other animals know something is different. We need to be paying attention. And so as people that enjoy the outdoors, we start to listen to the animals. I want to hear your questions. I want to hear what questions you have about wildlife. Let's just start on the right, and we'll go all the way around, and I'll get to as many as I can. Yes?
How long have you been doing this job?
A long time. This is my 28th year working for the Iowa DNR. Yep. But I have grown up with wildlife my entire life. Yes.
What's your favorite part of your job?
You know what it is? It's this. it's connecting people to wildlife. Because what I find out is I like wildlife, but a lot of people just like wildlife a little bit, but they always are interested in new questions, and I like explaining questions to people. I'm gonna go to the next one, okay? I'll get back to you.
What college are you from?
I went to Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa. I am a Cyclone, okay? So I have to root for the Cyclones. But I also went to school at a school called SUNY ESF, Environmental Science and Forestry in New York. Yep.
Do you just do wildlife or you do like indoor pets too?
No, just outdoor wildlife, but I also deal with people a lot. Probably deal with people more than I deal with the actual wildlife, yeah.
What kind of questions do people usually ask?
You know what my number one question is that I get phone calls about? How do I deal with these crazy squirrels? That is probably my number one question, but I get all kinds of questions. I deal with wild hogs, armadillos, turkeys, deer, whatever questions people might have, I try to help them with.
How many animals do you discover in one day?
In one day, it depends on what I'm doing. Yesterday, 0, because I was in meetings all day. Today, I've already seen blue jays and house cat walk through my backyard, so that's really not wildlife, but it was in the backyard. But it just depends on what I'm working on that day, yeah? We do lots of surveys where we'll look for specific animals, so we'll go out and survey just that animal on that day.
Does all wildlife need water to survive?
Everything that lives needs water at some point, but a lot of wildlife doesn't drink water. That is a great question. A lot of wildlife, including birds, gets their water from called metabolic water, from eating other things, eating plants, eating seeds, and they can get enough water through that way to digest. But they will drink if there's free water, open water available. Yeah.
What is your favorite animal?
Oh, that's a tough one. How do I pick my favorite?
Yeah.
You know what my kids would say my favorite animal is?
What?
Squirrels. Because I like to sit and watch the squirrels and I watch how they interact, but I love wild turkeys. I love watching ducks fly. Watching ducks fly and land and talk to each other is so much fun. It just depends on the season, really.
What inspired you?
You know, I just grew up in the outdoors with my family, and we like to live off of the land, so we picked up nuts, and we picked berries, and we hunted and did those things. And spending a lot of time fishing, if you've ever fished, anybody ever fished? A lot of downtime, right? When the bobber's not bobbing, you're not catching fish. I learned to watch the other wildlife, and that just led to more questions. So that's what really got me excited about wildlife in the outdoors. Yes?
What is the most common animal that you have ever seen?
You want to know what the most common animal probably is, and we don't see it very often? Mice.
Yeah. Oh,
There's a lot of mice out there that we don't even think about. If you go to a big grass field, a lot of mice. And if you talk about animals, sometimes you gotta be cautious. Are ants animals?
Yes.
There's a lot of ants out there. But we tend to think of the big animals that we see, right? The big ones. So in Iowa, we probably see a lot of deer. That's probably the one we see a lot. Rabbits, squirrels, all those things.
What's the biggest thing you've seen?
The biggest thing, probably a moose. And you know how close I was to that moose? About 5 feet away. That is pretty close to a moose. Moose are really tall. Yeah, but not in Iowa. I was in Minnesota then.
What's the rarest animal you ever found?
Oh, that is a good one. For Iowa, probably the rarest animal would be the spotted skunk. We almost have 0 spotted skunks left, and gray fox. That would probably be the rarest ones I've ever seen. Yeah.
Do you usually go out to the woods to find all these animals?
It depends. So there's different habitats, right? There's grasslands, forest lands, even marshes. So it depends on the area that the animal would be in where we do our surveys. I deal a lot with the forest animals, so I spend a lot of time in the forest. So deer, turkeys, squirrels, things like that.
Will you travel to find an animal?
It depends. I actually work all over the state of Iowa. So I can go from the Mississippi River to the Missouri River, but I live here in Indianola. Yeah.
What was the last thing that you discovered?
Discovered. What do you mean by discovered?
Saw
An animal? I would say probably a flying squirrel. And they are really cute, but they're hard to see because they're pretty much out at night, nocturnal. Yes.
What's the most dangerous thing that you've discovered?
Oh, dangerous. That's a tough one too. So like vicious dangerous, or dangerous like I'm in trouble and I shouldn't be doing that kind of thing.
Like
Vicious. I would say a bobcat, and not because bobcats are vicious, because I was trying to do some research on the bobcat and he didn't like what I was doing and he bit me. Yeah. But he wasn't doing it because he was mad. He was defending himself. It was my fault because I didn't handle it quite right. Yeah.
What do you like about your career?
What I love about it is exactly this. One is discovering new questions and then helping people understand wildlife so that they appreciate it. Because not everybody gets to go outside all day long like our teachers that have to be in here with you guys all day. So I come in here. So I like being able to come and talk to people about going out on your free time and discovering wildlife.
Have you discovered any new animals?
New ones. I would say the flying squirrel. It's not new, but to me it was a new one. I've seen those a few times. Yeah, but I haven't discovered like anything we're gonna say is gonna make the world news or anything like that. No.
What's the most interesting part of your career?
Interesting part, probably just the day-to-day changes of how people use wildlife and understand wildlife. And I often feel like I'm the voice for wildlife. So people might not like things that happen, or they may not understand why wildlife's doing what it's doing, and I have to explain to them why that's happening. So real quick, I'll get some more questions. What's gonna happen starting this week with wild deer? What's that? Hibernate? No, they're gonna start their mating season. And mating means that they go crazy and they run all over the place. So be careful with your parents when they're driving cars. That's when people call me a lot because they'll say, "What's going on with the deer?" And I'm like, "It's mating season." So be careful driving. Yeah.
What made you interested in your job?
Being outside, just sitting and observing. So sometimes it's not about being active, it's just sitting and watching stuff. If you guys have ever done that, next time you go out in the playground, I know it's hard not to just run around when you're outside. Just go off to the side and sit on the bench and watch your classmates play and say, wonder why they're doing that. Why is this happening? Why are they all wearing hats today? And yesterday we didn't have hats on. Did you guys wear coats this morning? Yeah. Did you wear coats 2 days ago? No. Why did it change so quick? Just asking those questions. That's what makes me fun. But thinking about wildlife. Wildlife can't change their coats, can they?
Yeah, they can. They can grow.
Boys and girls, if you already asked a question, let's let the people who haven't yet. So put your hand down. We're just going to see if we have time for one for each person, and then at the end. Yeah, so if you already asked one, put your hand down, loves.
Did you ask me? Go ahead.
My neighbor he works for the DNR. And one day we know his name is Nate.
Nate? Mm-hmm.
Nate Anderson.
Yep.
Oh, and we have a dad in here that you would know. Where's Mr. Andrews? Oh, no, he's in second grade. Strable, Travis Strable.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep, he's the one who,
Yep. There's several people who work for the DNR that live in Warren County.
How many animals have you seen in your career?
How many have I seen? Thousands and thousands and thousands. How many have I touched? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So that's the fun part about being a wildlife biologist in research. We get to catch animals and put tags on them and measure them and weigh them and doing all kinds of research on them. All right.
Do you know how old the animals are?
Some of them we do. Okay. You know how we tell the age of some animals? Especially like deer and bobcats, their teeth. So we will pull a tooth on a bobcat and cut it. And you guys know, like with trees, they put a ring in every year. Your tooth does the same thing. We can pull that and cut it, and we can figure out how old that animal is. Sometimes you might look at things like their feathers change or their color changes. So there's just different ways for different species. With turtles, you can count the rings on their shells. And they're called scutes. The outside of their shells will tell how old it is. Yeah.
What animal is the cutest one you've seen?
The cutest one? I like flying squirrels. They are really fluffy. Really fluffy.
Real quick question. Sorry to interrupt about squirrels, though. Have you noticed that the ones on the east side of town are like much darker and black? They look like monkeys.
Genetics.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? And then over here, they're more reddish brownish.
And then there's whiter ones and there's blonde ones. So does everybody in this room look the same?
No.
Does every squirrel the same?
No.
To us, we say, oh, they're all the same,
Yeah.
but to them, they're not. There is change, and that's genetics. That's kind of what I want to get to as we get through some more questions is science is one, what I do is one thing, but then there's genetics, and there's all kinds of other things in science. Yeah, go ahead.
What is the animal that you should not do like run?
Well, so here's the number one rule of animals, wild animals. Everybody listen to this. What's the number one rule of wild animals?
They're wild.
We don't poke them with a stick. Who said don't mess with them? Exactly. So we don't poke animals with a stick because they will defend themselves. And we don't get between mamas and babies because mamas will always defend their babies. So we just observe them from a distance. That's the best rule for wildlife. Yes.
Have you ever wondered where a grizzly bear lives and tried to find her?
Not in Iowa. So I would love to see where grizzly bears live, but that's probably going to be in Alaska in that way. So yeah, you have to know every animal has a different habitat and a different place that they live in. Yeah.
I would never get between a mama bear and a baby grizzly.
Never. That is absolutely a great rule to do. Yep.
Do you grow up in the wild or did you grow up in town?
I grew up in the rural. I didn't grow up in the wild. I had a house. Okay.
I know, in like the country.
I lived in the country when I grew up. Yeah.
Does he
I
look
do-
like a wild thing? Were you
I do
that's
achieve it. I
that's
do
a
achieve
good
it.
question,
It is.
Simon.
But I did. I grew up in the country, which helped because a lot of times we would go fishing at night or we'd be outside. We had a lot of access, and that's one thing today. A lot of younger people don't have access to the outdoors, so that's why it's important to stress things like the nature center or Pickard Park, places that are close to urban areas that we can still get out and see wildlife and enjoy the wildlife. There's a lot of wildlife in town in Indianola. I guarantee you that.
Do you study insects?
I don't. I learn a little bit about insects, but not a lot. But mostly because some of the animals I study eat insects. So I have to know a little bit about that. But I love discovering. If I find a moth, I'll get my books out and I'll discover and figure out a little bit about that animal. Yeah.
I have a hummingbird feeder, and why do their wings go so fast?
That's just an adaptation. It allows them to hover to get the pollen out of the flowers. If they were like a regular bird, could a blue jay stop and get pollen out of a flower?
No.
Flying too fast. But a hummingbird has learned how to beat its wings so fast to do that. Hummingbirds are amazing. And what hummingbird do we have in Iowa?
The yellow, the
Ruby-throated. The ruby-throated. But if you go out west in Arizona, they've got like 9 different hummingbirds, all different sizes. So that is really cool to know.
what's the funnest thing that you've ever discovered?
The funnest thing, I really liked working with bobcats. They were pretty unique animals. Yeah. I'm gonna go way to the back.
How many spotted skunks are there?
So we've only seen one spotted skunk reported in Iowa in the last about 50 years. Yeah, they might still be out there, but we don't even know if they're out there or not. They're very rare. That's a good paper for somebody to write something.
What's your favorite animal that you found in Iowa?
In Iowa, I enjoy wild turkeys a lot. I enjoy wild turkeys. They are fun to watch, especially because they kind of travel in groups. So it's fun to watch them interact.
What is the heaviest animal you've ever weighed?
Probably in Iowa, a white-tailed deer. Yeah, about 300 pounds. Yeah, big. Most deer weigh about 140 pounds, and this was a big deer. Yeah.
What type of animals do you study?
I study what are called forest wildlife animals. So that would be the animals that use forest as their main habitat. So for me, it's deer, turkeys, squirrels, ruffed grouse. We have ruffed grouse in Iowa. And even some other animals that we don't even think about sometimes, like the woodpeckers and things like that.
What's the farthest you've ever traveled to find a species of animal?
In Iowa, all the way to Alameda County, which is clear up in the northeast part of the state.
What's the most endangered animal?
That's a tough one. In Iowa, we have several, and actually, we have the thing that go back to that question. Endangered animal means that there's not many of them left. We have actually lost animals in Iowa, like the bobcat, the white-tailed deer, and the wild turkey, were all completely gone from the state. And now they've all come back to the state, and we have healthy populations of all 3 of them, which is one of my jobs, is to make sure we have manageable, healthy populations.
Have you ever found any stray animals
Absolutely. So what we don't know about sometimes is we think about the common animals like possums and skunks and raccoons. We've actually had a lynx come through Iowa. We've had, black bears come into Iowa. We've had a moose come into Iowa. So those would be animals we would call transient animals, moving through the state, but don't have populations here. A cockatiel? Yeah, but not a wild animal for us.
Have you ever seen a saltwater crocodile or any other crocodile?
Only in a zoo. Only in a zoo, not in Iowa, but I have seen them in zoos. Yes.
Have you seen those hoop snakes that they'll eat, so they'll put their tail in their mouth and
I've seen pictures of them, yeah, but we don't have those in Iowa. The coolest snake that we have in Iowa, I think, is lots of cool snakes, and I'm not a snake guy. Hognose snakes. Because you know what they do? They're like a possum. They play dead. If you ever find a hognose snake and you poke it with a stick, which we're not supposed to do, it'll flip over on its back and act like it's dead. And then it'll pee on itself, because most animals that want to eat something don't like stuff that's already dead, so it'll stink, and that'll get the wild, like the coyote or the fox, to walk away.
Well, exactly the face you guys are making, that's exactly why that is really smart of that animal.
Yep.
Because would you go buy some stinky peeing on itself animal? No, so it's going to be able to survive and reproduce better, because you guys are going to stay away from it.
Yes.
What age did you start your job at?
What age? Great question. What age did I start my job? So, when I got a paycheck, I was in my 20s. But I would say my job really started when I was about in 2nd or 3rd grade when I started fishing. I started paying attention to stuff, and that led me to my career. So the things that you do now will help develop what you want to do when you're in the future.
What coolest fish have you caught?
Coolest fish? I have caught a 48-inch muskie. How tall are you guys? 48 inches. That's 3 feet plus another foot. That was a fun fish to catch. But you know what my funnest fish to catch is? I love catching bluegills with my kids. It is so much fun catching bluegills with my kids. And you know what? My kids aren't kids anymore. They're in their 20s. And you know what they want to do when they come home? Go fishing with their dad. That's what's fun. Yes?
What's the most interesting animal that you found?
Most interesting. So bobcats are really unique. They are fun because they have a lot of, if any of you have house cats, watch your house cat, how much they interact with things and watch things. Think about it as a wild animal. Bobcats are really unique in how they hunt and how they do different things.
Boys and girls, if you've already asked a question, put your hand down. I want to make sure everyone gets a chance, and then we'll let him talk a little bit more, okay?
'Cause I'm trying to remember which ones I've already
Yeah.
called on. Did I call her you?
Have you saw an eagle before?
Eagles, yes. I've actually handled eagles before. And you know what? Great grip strength. Eagles, when they perch, they can really hang on to stuff. They can swoop down and get fish out of water. They eat a lot of skunks. Did you know that? Yeah. There's 2 things that eat skunks: eagles and owls. Those are the 2 things that eat skunks the most. Yeah. What's that? Vultures? Vultures eat dead stuff. Yeah.
Like a dead skunk.
They would, yeah. Once it's dead, they would. But I'm talking about eating live skunks.
So, these guys in the spring, they'll start talking about habitats and habitat change and how that can, animals, what they're going to do, they'll either die or they'll move. Could you talk a little bit about that, what you see in Iowa, like the Iowa habitats? Yeah.
So that's the great thing about wildlife is we can predict what's going to happen with a lot of wildlife. I just said deer are going to be starting to mate here this next week, so their behavior is going to change. What's an animal right now whose behavior is going to change immediately now that it's 30 degrees? Groundhogs. Because what do groundhogs do? They hibernate. They're one of the only animals in the state that truly hibernate, so they're going to go underground. It's been warm, so they think they should be above ground. Now it's cold, they're going to go underground, and we won't see them until when?
April.
Is there a special day for groundhogs? And why do we do that?
Because it depends.
Yeah.
Because it depends if winter's coming early.
We kind of say in a wives' tale that the groundhog will predict if spring's going to come early or not. But what's really going to happen is the groundhog's going to come out because it's ready now that it can start feeding on grasses and things again. But groundhogs will be hibernating. That's a great thing. Fish are starting to even move and change differently because I will say this, and I'm kind of a big person, we see that, right? You know what happens in the fall for most wildlife, including humans?
They get hunted.
They eat more. When you guys go into the cafeteria, I'll bet you the cafeteria people say, oh man, they're eating a lot more, because your body's telling you winter's coming. And when winter's coming, we start to store fat because we don't know if we'll find enough food, especially if you're a wild animal, so you want to store up food. And when food's plentiful, a lot of wild animals actually that's all right. They'll gain weight through the winter because they're getting ready for spring, because a lot of animals breed in the spring and have their babies in the spring. So they want to be healthy. So lots of changes. Here's a good one for you, and I always joke about this. How many of you go to the dentist? Okay. Next time you go to the dentist, ask the dentist this question. I have two questions, two fun ones for you. So what do bluebirds and dentists have in common?
Why? Clean your teeth.
Well, bluebirds don't clean your teeth.
Why?
So you have to think about wildlife. Think about birds and how birds nest. Some birds build a nest, right? Which are platform builders. No, birds don't really have teeth. They kind of do. Think about where birds nest.
Birds go in trees and.
In what in trees?
Cavities.
Cavities. Who said cavities?
Oh yeah.
So bluebirds and dentists both fill cavities. Bluebirds build their nests in cavities, and dentists. So ask your dentist that joke. And then, if you really want to sound important, say, I have a deciduous tooth that's a little loose. Could you look at that? What does deciduous mean?
Oh, the kindergartners would know. They're doing trees.
Are they? What happens in the trees this time of the year? They fall off the leaves. That's why we call it fall, right? The leaves are falling. And your deciduous teeth, because as humans we have two sets of teeth, your deciduous tooth is your baby tooth, falls out. So we call it deciduous tooth because it falls out. Our trees that leaves fall are called deciduous trees. Exactly. So there's a lot of things in life that are associated with wildlife and the outdoors that we don't even think about on a day-to-day basis. And that's your job, is to ask those questions.
Well, we have about 5 more minutes.
5.
So if you want to show them, what you brought or whatever, I'm sure they're dying to know.
Here's what I'm going to challenge you with. Does everybody love wildlife?
Yes.
Some more than others, probably. Some people don't love wildlife as much. Or some people enjoy wildlife, but maybe not to the point we want to go out and touch it or be and observe it. But what I'm going to challenge you is that there's lots of ways to enjoy wildlife. We can observe it. We can write about it. Okay? We can draw it. We can actually become scientists. But not everybody's going to become a scientist, right? But even if you're not a scientist, you can still enjoy wildlife. So what I'm going to do, what holiday's coming up pretty quickly in the month of November?
Thanksgiving.
And what do we associate with Thanksgiving?
Turkey.
So I have brought some turkey feathers today. And everybody's going to get one. But what I want to do is challenge you, and I brought you 2 different kinds. Some of them aren't in the best shapes. This is a wing feather, and these are the tail feathers. So you guys will get to take these. But I want you to look at how the feather is structured, how they're different, how stiff they are. Why would the wing feather be different from the tail feather? I'm going to challenge you to ask yourself questions about just turkey feathers. And then for those of you that like to draw, you can draw feathers. Some of you can think about the engineering behind the feathers. You can name all the different parts of the feathers. I want this to be your journey on understanding feathers so you understand birds better. Okay? So I'm going to pass these around, or I'll leave them with you and you can pass them around.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I will probably leave them with your teacher since you guys have lunch next. Because otherwise we'd put them in your lunch basket and they would get dirty and things. So you will get those after lunch recess.
But I want to challenge you. Some of you can just draw them. Some of you can build stuff with them. So,
ooh, maybe we'll do that and we'll send you some of our pictures.
You know what a fun thing to build with these are? Is put these in like a Nerf ball or a styrofoam ball, and you can make indoor lawn darts.
Fun.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
You had a question. What was your question? Do you? A lot of people love to collect turkey feathers. turkey, the dusters from the English were all made of feathers. Oh, and something that I didn't talk about is what makes this so important to the United States?
Ooh.
To write, quill feathers. So it's often thought that the feathers that were used to sign the Constitution were actually turkey feathers.
Well, you know how our national bird is the eagle? Benjamin Franklin wanted it to be the turkey. He thought that would have been the
He
best.
thought it was a regal bird. He
Yeah.
thought it was a bird that would have represented us well. Yeah. Yes.
For moose, like, how close have you got? Like,
To the moose,
like, how many mooses have you seen?
I've seen probably in person, yeah, a dozen to 15. And the closest one I was alive was about 15 feet. I've touched dead ones before.
Like, what states have you traveled to go see it?
So I have worked in Iowa. I have worked in Idaho. I have worked in New York. I have worked in Minnesota. I have traveled to Wisconsin and Michigan and Illinois to work. So I have been in a lot of places. You know what? Wildlife is the same and wildlife is different in every state. That's what's fun about traveling too, is when you travel, you get to go see wildlife. We're probably not gonna see antelope in Iowa. We're gonna have to travel out west. Never gonna see an elephant in Iowa unless you go to the zoo. So you'll probably have to travel to a different country to see an elephant. Yes?
If you have a pen, this happened to me before. I was writing and then some of the ink came out.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm thinking, if I have like a little like bucket or something, I could put the ink in there and use the feather to write stuff with it.
You know what works really well if you want to practice is don't use ink, use tempered paint. So if you guys have tempered paint, you can practice your signature with paint, and then if you don't like it, you can clean it up with water stuff. If you use ink, it can get all over. So try it with paint first. Yeah, that's great. And practice adding your name with it. And that's how people used to write. They had their ink well and they used quill pens. But you know what? We decided that quill pens weren't the most efficient way to write. So somebody decided, I'm going to take this idea and I'm going to create a pen. And then I'm going to create a ballpoint pen. And then I'm going to create a better pen and a better pen. And so we start to learn how we're going to do different things. Pencils. Yeah.
Boys and girls, I have one more question for Mr. Coffey, but I also have one more question for you guys first. Who in this room thinks they would like to have a job someday like Mr. Coffey, be a wildlife biologist? Yeah, were you going to be outside and study animals and teach people about them? Absolutely. Now, you could have his job, but specialize in plants. We have a girl in town, Mrs. Flat, and she does trees. She does what he does, but just with trees.
Yeah.
So if animals aren't your gig, you could do trees.
And I work with Jessica a
Do you
lot.
work with her? Yeah, her
Absolutely.
son went through Irving, so she came out and helped us with some tree stuff.
Because she was a state forester,
Yeah.
and she dealt with the habitats, and I dealt with the animals. So we worked very well in partnership together. We were trying to do certain things on the state forest. So not everyone will be a wildlife biologist. The thing that I want to encourage you, though, young ladies, when I went to school, there were 2 girls in the entire Iowa State Wildlife Department. 2. Today, it's over 50%.
Wow.
So there's a lot of females that are entering the outdoors. And what I always told my daughters is it's not about how much stuff you can lift, it's about how much is between your ears. So understanding wildlife isn't how strong you are, it's how smart you are. So anybody can be a wildlife biologist if you put the time and effort into understanding wildlife and observing.
Well, and that was going to be my final question for you. What would you say to these future scientists? What would be your final bit of advice? Liam, sweetie, we can email him later with more questions. Okay, babe?
How about one last?
One last one,
What's your
okay.
last question? Make it a good one.
One of those feathers I actually have at home, and one day we were going on this trail and my daddy found it, and we didn't know it was a turkey feather. We just thought it was a regular feather off of some bird, but we didn't know where it came from. He just found it on the ground.
So that's actually a great thing, and I'm glad you brought that up, is you can possess turkey feathers because that's a species that we hunt in Iowa, but you can't possess other bird feathers. So like if you found a blue jay feather, you legally can't
Ooh,
possess that.
that's
And you
good to
can't
know.
possess bird nests. They're actually protected. So you can pick up feathers from animals that we hunt, which would be like grouse and quail and pheasants and turkeys, but you can't pick up blue jay feathers or goldfinch feathers or things like that. We have to leave those outside. And what was your question again, real quick?
Just some advice
Oh,
to these future
advice.
scientists. Your final parting words to these guys
So-
about science, or
Yeah. If you want to be a good scientist, you have to learn the scientific method, or the new term, the
since in
scientific.
engineering practices.
practice. But it really means sometimes just being quiet, sitting and watching and observing. So the best way to become a scientist is be very good about how you ask questions, be good at collecting data so that you can analyze that data, and then be able to be good at writing and talking so that you can give other people that information. So always be inquisitive, always ask questions. Good scientists have 1,000 questions in their mind, and then they have to figure out which one's the best one I want to ask.
Well, what do we tell Mr. Coffey?